Wherever you are on your e-commerce journey, just starting out, moving your physical store online, or streamlining operations, you're looking to grow. But with growth comes complexity, so you need to be smart. What if you had software that enabled you to provide a seamless customer experience that solved the problems keeping you up at night and prevented chaos behind the scenes? Would you take the next step in e-commerce? At ShipStation, we empower retailers to scale on existing channels and expand to new markets, at home and abroad. No matter where you sell or how you deliver, we give you the tools you need to replace manual processes with simple, automated ones. Eliminate errors, save money, and most importantly, take back your time. So you can focus on what matters most. Creating a business that everyone loves, you, your team, and your customers. We are ShipStation, devoted to helping you build a business that runs as beautiful as it looks.
Looking for a smarter approach to growing sales on online marketplaces? ChannelAdvisor Marketplaces helps you sell more efficiently with optimized product data, prevent overselling with synchronized inventory levels, outmaneuver competitors with powerful repricing tools, reach more customers with automated advertising campaigns, measure your performance against competitors, and expand your products to hundreds of marketplaces around the world, all from a single integration. The best part? ChannelAdvisor scales with your business wherever you want to grow. It's why we've been named the #1 channel management provider to the Internet Retailer Top 1000 every year since 2013. Need a hands-off approach? Let our managed services team of marketplace experts guide your day-to-day strategy and execution for you. ChannelAdvisor. One platform, endless possibilities.
Hi everyone, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for the Wine With Us event. My name is Bonnie Brady and I head up partnerships for Payoneer in the ANZ region. And today I am also joined by Joshua Haynes from ShipStation.
Hi everyone, I'm the partner manager across at ShipStation and your co-host with Bonnie today. Thanks,
It's fantastic to have retailers and e-commerce experts from all around Australia joining us today. Now, we do know that a large number of you are based in the wonderful New South Wales and lovely Victoria, who are currently enduring a very long lockdown, which I'm sure has brought some highs and some lows for you over the last couple of months. But hopefully your wine tasting box with some goodies inside has helped sweeten up your Thursday afternoon and has been a bit of a highlight for the day. Now, I don't want to dwell on COVID-19 for too long, but we do know that it has affected a wide variety. Digital acceleration has meant that the landscape and the ANZ market has changed, and with this comes new customer expectations and also demands. So today we are lucky enough to be joined by some industry leaders in their field from ChannelAdvisor, ShipStation, Payoneer, and also Amazon, who are going to discuss these market trends, the e-commerce growth that we have seen off the back of the pandemic, and how to maximise the opportunities that we are presented in 2021. There's going to be an opportunity for a short Q&A session at the very end. So throughout the presentations, if you have any questions for ChannelAdvisor, ShipStation and Payoneer, please feel free to just pop in the chat bar below in your Zoom. But before we jump into it, inside your gift box, you would have received 3 delicious vinos. And today we are joined by Dave Armstrong from Shorty's Liquor, who is going to run us through the tasting vinos that you have received. You should have also received one of these tasting notes wheel. So be sure to have these on hand when it comes to tasting the wines throughout the sessions alongside 3 glasses. Also just going to ask all of our speakers to quickly pop on your videos so you can join Josh, Dave and I for the vino tasting. So Dave, over to yourself.
Thanks very much, Bonnie, and thank you everyone for having me this afternoon. What I'm going to do is just talk through the 3 wines that you have in front of you. And without further ado, I think the best thing to do is to get one open and to start having a taste, and then we can talk through the wines and a little bit of stuff around them. So if you open the first bottle, which is the Prosecco, this is from Santa Margherita, from Valdobbiadene, which is the Prosecco region up just north of Venice in Italy, and really the home of Prosecco. So if you just pour yourselves around 30 mils, we'll do about 30.
Want the whole bottle, Dave?
Oh, you could do the bottle if you want, but yeah, we'll try and do 30 mils just to have a little taste, and then we'll move on to the other 2 wines next, the Sauvignon Blanc and then the Shiraz from the Barossa. So Prosecco is seeing absolutely enormous growth in Australia as a wine, largely on the back of champagne prices going up over the last sort of 10 years, and Prosecco quality going up as well. And I think this particular wine is a wonderful example of how good Prosecco is as a premium sparkling wine. When you taste it, just let it linger in your mouth and get a bit of smell on the nose. So you sort of grasp the fruit flavors and a little bit of the, just give it a swirl, bit of wine stuff, and give it a smell. It's got a lovely sort of, quite a fresh nose there, but a little bit of sweetness. And the characteristics of really good Prosecco are slightly sweet on the front palate and a bit dry at the same time. So it's got a wonderful bit of acidity, and as that flows over your palate, you'll get a bit of sweetness. Now, in your box from Wine With Us, there was a wonderful little packet of Kangaroo Island olives. Now, these will match perfectly with this Prosecco. So with something like olives, you're very oily and you need something with a bit of acidity that'll sort of cut through it, and Prosecco meets that. So, amazing. Yeah, I hope you
What's your favorite Prosecco, Dave?
This one, actually, I tend to be honest, I've picked wines that I like. I'm quite sort of selfish in that regard. And I think, if you're going to talk about wine, you need to talk about what you like. Yeah. But I think, I always say to people is experiment, go and try different stuff. One of my guilty pleasures is going into, a Dan Murphy's and sort of saying, I'm going to buy 12 wines I've never had before. And let's just see what they're like. And if you're traveling overseas, it's a wonderful experience to pop into a local bottle shop where you can't speak a word of language and you just pick a bit and just learn. Wine's all about tasting and learning, and it's great fun.
Yeah. So have you been to Italy and gone wine tasting there in their region yet?
I haven't actually. Italy's on the list. I've spent quite a bit of time in Spain and Portugal. Yep. And in the southwest of France, down in Bordeaux. All wonderful regions. And it's Italy's next on the cards. We were meant to go last year, but obviously that was pushed back. So
COVID. What was Bordeaux like? I'm selfish because we do have a my French colleague lives there. So you know, he's always talking about wine. Sometimes I see him having one on his lunch when he's in a conference.
Yeah, Bordeaux. I mean, Bordeaux's it's a wonderful region. Wonderful wines, all Cabernet based. And parts of it are all Merlot based. If we think about Margaret River in Australia, is a very probably the closest you'll get globally to really high quality Bordeaux wines. The thing about Bordeaux is the wines, the nice wines, the really good ones are really expensive. So, you know, discovery in Bordeaux is great fun because you're looking for something that fits your budget that also is really tasty. All right, we might move on to the next wine. So this wine is...
sorry, Dave, we're going to do that after we...
Oh, sorry.
After we proceed with... I'll let Bonnie actually take over and proceed to the next agenda item. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, awesome, Dave. That was delicious. I definitely am partial to a wee glass of bubbles. For me, it always reminds me that I'm celebrating with some friends and family, which, fingers crossed, touch wood, we aren't too far away from doing. Although, having said that, you might hear I've got a bit of a Kiwi accent. And fun fact, I grew up in the Marlborough Sounds, where I see the Sauvignon Blanc that we're about to try potentially in the next wine tasting session after we hear from our speaker this afternoon. So I look forward to hearing a little bit more about that one coming up. But before we do that, I'm going to hand over to Simon Clarkson, who is the Managing Director for ChannelAdvisor in the APAC region. Simon leads the company's regional strategy and direction for growth. He has been at ChannelAdvisor for a number of years, but prior to that has been in other e-commerce roles, including being the Director of Sales at BigCommerce. So Simon, over to you to talk us through the Australian e-commerce insights for 2021. Oh, Simon, you just need to take yourself off mute.
Trying to find the toolbar to allow me to do that when I'm using for the first time, I've decided to use two monitors and it's already caught me out. Can you see my screen okay? Is that all good?
Yep.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, hello everyone. As was mentioned, my name is Simon Clarkson. I'm the Managing Director for ChannelAdvisor for Asia Pacific. I thought a good place to start beyond the video you saw earlier was to tell you a little bit about ChannelAdvisor and how we work with thousands of brands and retailers all around the world. Our goal is to help you to be able to sell more by connecting your products through to consumers where they may be searching for them. And I'm sure we all appreciate the complexity that's happened and the fragmentation that's happened throughout the consumer buying journey over the last few years, with consumers looking to be able to discover products and brands through social media and research products through other channels as well. But of course, transactions happen through marketplaces or direct with retailers or brands, and connecting with consumers throughout that journey, as I mentioned, is coming more and more complex. So that's where ChannelAdvisor comes into it. We help simplify that whole arrangement. Our goal is to take your product data, structure and optimize it, and distribute it out to those channels that are going to be successful for you. Not only bring back orders and other information too, but to give you insights and data as how you can continue to optimize your presence and to be able to sell more. We connect into 190 different marketplaces all around the world. So if you are looking to do cross-border trade, and I know Nathan's talking about that a little bit later, we can obviously help you to be able to do that. But of course, as was mentioned, today we're going to talk about some broad e-commerce insights. And of course, over the next 10 minutes, we don't have a lot of time to go into detail, but some key points that I thought would be worthwhile bringing up would be around e-commerce growth in Australia. So over the last financial year, we've seen Australia grow online shopping about 32% or close to 32%, which is about the same growth as we saw the previous year. So now Australians are spending $52.1 billion online in goods spent, which is about 16.3% of online share of retail spend. So retail spend is growing at 9.1%, but online shopping is growing at 32%. you can see that play out here. This is Australia Post's recent e-commerce updates, and you can see the year-on-year growth throughout online shopping purchase volume, and you can see how lockdown has impacted and influenced this spend. But I think one thing it's important to notice is it's not just the same audience actually purchasing more online, although that is happening. If you look at the cohort that has traditionally been online spenders, they're spending more. But what we're also seeing is 9.1 million households shopped online between the 1st of July 2020 and 30th of June 2021. So that means that it's about 3/4 of online shoppers have households in Australia have engaged in online shopping, but 1.3 million households had actually entered and purchased online for the first time in 2020. So we saw people spending more, but also the audience getting a lot bigger as well. Now, on top of that, shoppers purchased far more regularly. So 52% of shoppers purchased more frequently in 2020. 26% of those shopped at least 10 times between March and December. So you can see across in those regions, those categories there, the increase that was felt across the board. But of course, one thing we all did experience and see is supply and demand shock. And one of those extreme areas that we saw there was around toilet paper. This was in our platform. We could see the demand for the toilet paper obviously spike, but obviously there was those supply shocks that were felt. And of course, that created a different behavior. We saw people then searching for alternative products to be able to fulfill those needs. And so that audience that we spoke about earlier, when they were jumping online and purchasing products, they were also then looking for different products as well. In fact, 31% of consumers purchase items online that they'd never purchased online before. And over on the right-hand side, you can see there, it wasn't just additional products. It was actually 22% of those online shoppers, this was in August last year alone, had actually purchased from a new website they hadn't purchased from before. So when you look at that, you could see that Australians are becoming far more comfortable with purchasing online. We had, to recap, we had those online shoppers purchasing more. We saw a much wider audience, a new cohort entering into online shopping space, purchasing more regularly, purchasing new types of products and from additional retailers. So we saw expansion across the board. And now you can see here that 46%, this was last month, saying that they're more comfortable shopping online now than they were even just last year. And that's right throughout the buying cycle. 73% of consumers are saying they're using multiple channels throughout their buying journey. So back to what I was referring to earlier around the complexity around tracking consumer behavior, it is becoming more difficult and more challenging, but people are becoming more and more comfortable with doing it. But even though that is the case, there is still some consistent themes that we're seeing that I thought would be worthwhile highlighting around what consumers are looking for. And I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to many of us on the call today that people are looking for bargains. They're looking for promotions and opportunities to get involved with online sales that you can see here as well. So 57% saying, this was Shopify saying that there was 57% saying cheaper prices was what they were interested in. But you can also see across the board that taking advantage of bargains is one of those key drivers for consumers to spend and increase their spend online. But convenience is also a significant part of that. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I wanted to highlight here, free delivery is one of those key aspects that people are looking for. Free delivery is a priority for online shoppers. You can see here, 71% saying it's their top priority. And down here, you can see that 68% were saying that what prevents them from purchasing online is delivery charges. So as brands and retailers, you need to take that into consideration when having a look at the way you go to market, the way you price as well. Another area I thought I wanted to touch on, which seemed to be a common challenge, is consumers saying they'd purchased products, but their order was cancelled because stock wasn't available. 54% of consumers said they had gone through that. And when you look at the results of that, 51% said they abandoned their purchase altogether, and 26% said then they went somewhere else. Only 18% said they find an alternative product, or 5% said they'll wait for it to become available. Now, what you don't see on here as well is actually about 20% of that those surveys said that if they did experience it, it's either very unlikely or unlikely they would ever shop from that retailer again. So making sure your inventory is accurate and up to date is obviously critically important for that great user experience. And of course, considering where we are in the scheme of things and the calendar year, it's important to recognize when consumers start shopping. So this was a survey we ran saying that when do you start your holiday shopping. You can see 61% of consumers are planning to do that between October and November. So getting prepared now, that calendar, and of course all your operations and in preparation for those consumers starting to spend is important to get that done as quickly as possible. And of course we see these key e-commerce dates coming up between now and the end of the year, but also we see other site-wide sales as well that need to be taken into consideration depending on where you're planning on selling on. So just briefly, if we look at the takeaways, by 2023, it's expected that e-commerce sales will be about 22.3% of the total retail spend. And we are going to get past this pandemic eventually. But Australian online shopping audience has grown significantly in that time. And a lot of the behaviours that we're seeing will likely stay. So shoppers are still looking to use online to access those bargains and sales events. And because it's more convenient now for them. And of course, this is a requirement. They're requiring brands and retailers to come along for that journey and continue to offer them that value, but also a wide selection of flexible delivery options and a great user experience. So prepare now and have your products show up right across those multiple touch points that we spoke about earlier that happen right throughout that buying journey to make sure you give yourself the best chance of success between now and the end of the year. If you need help doing that, by all means, please feel free to reach out to a team. We're more than happy to have that conversation with you and help you to be able to automate and optimize your channels to market as well. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the wines.
Thanks, Simon. That was very insightful. I think you painted a pretty good picture of that e-commerce landscape here in Australia and the sales opportunity that merchants have in their own home market. Our next speaker is David Boyer. David is the country manager for ShipStation in Australia and New Zealand, and he has 7 years experience helping businesses across the world optimize their fulfillment process. He's very passionate about helping businesses scale wherever they sell and however they want to ship. So over to you, David, to talk us through the importance that shipping plays in the customer's experience and journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie. Got to do the classic check if everything works. I assume, yep, looking good. Awesome. Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nothing better than getting together remotely the best we can and enjoying some lovely drinks. So really pleased to be here, and thank you to all the partners for helping in this initiative. This has been really wonderful so far. Already learned lots. Thanks, Simon. So I'm David, by way of introduction. Bonnie, thank you for those highlights. I'm country manager for ShipStation and ShipEngine, our sister company across Australia and New Zealand. So today I just wanted to talk a bunch of ship, right, with a focus around how to make e-commerce fulfillment strategy or your e-commerce fulfillment strategy go global. So I'd like to first briefly introduce our business, which is obviously ShipStation. So what do we do? So we're a cloud-based order and shipping management software that helps retailers of all shapes and sizes streamline, scale, and automate their back office shipping processes. So we're pre-integrated with over 200 channels, 40 carriers, 100 what we call tangent e-commerce solutions, which means you can spend less time integrating and more time getting your orders to your customers. So we integrate with all the leading providers in Australia. So it's bring your own account with Ozpost, Sendle, DHL, you name it, to help you deliver in Australia and beyond. So we offer world-class business automation or business process automation around shipping. You can batch process, you can do thousands of orders in seconds, really to eliminate the manual repetitive tasks that are killing your business dispatching efficiency right in the warehouse. So lastly, we offer a ton of features around post-purchase experience branding. So we provide you tools to wow and re-engage with your shoppers through branded notifications, customizable shipping emails. Also, you can make that experience after the purchase through the delivery towards your brand and not the carriers. So that's the platform. And like Simon did a great job of doing just a couple moments ago, I wanted to kick things off a little bit step back to give you guys some of the trends that we're seeing globally from a fulfillment and shipping perspective, right? And there's no better way to do that than to talk about how crazy it's been even the last 2-3 months here in Oz, but also globally what we've seen over the past year. So no surprise, and Simon did a great job of summarizing this. Online shopping is up, way up everywhere. I'm not going to touch on the AU number specifically because Simon drilled into that a bit, but we're seeing today 2x, 3x of what we saw last year during the shopping peak, which started probably yesterday. So at the height of this pandemic, we saw about 10 years of e-commerce growth happen in just 90 days globally. So we saw, or what we're seeing today is that the e-commerce penetration rate globally is at an all-time high of 16.4% of total global retail sales. So just a really good health metric of our industry. But as you'd expect around shipping, a lot of retailers weren't prepared. This online traffic was unprecedented. Like Simon mentioned, supply chains were completely unprepared. So there's new safety measures in place. There's new slowdowns happening there, all while new sales were coming through at an unprecedented rate. So if we're comparing the 2 years, so 2019, 2020, and we zoom in on shipping, 2019 was all about fast and free. 2020 is all about patience. Consumers are willing to wait up to 8 days now to receive an order and often pay for expedited shipping, express shipping, and be okay with it. So although 68% of consumers agree that COVID has lowered their expectations about receiving a delivery on time, this year, what we're seeing is a new normal when it comes to expectations around transparency, where like the slide shows, 94% of consumers want to be informed about potential delays, not just by the carrier, but also by the retailer. So that's a new expectation there. So if I narrow in even more on our theme for today, which is going global, it's obvious, but global competition for customers is on the rise, right? More and more individuals around the world are gaining access to the internet, in particular through smartphones. So there's this global shift in consumer behavior towards buying online over buying in store. So it's estimated by next year, mobile retail is going to be roughly 73% of total global e-commerce sales. So obviously, if you want to make it big, you have to go where the audience is, which is online. So with a large portion of that mobile commerce starting through social applications, what we're seeing is that that barrier between international brands and consumers is breaking down, right? Because of the ease of access. And shipping internationally could be the right move for entering into those new customer segments in those new countries. So another obvious tip here, a quick tip, is to expand and consider adding a new marketplace channel, either domestically or overseas, right? So we have a lot of supporting evidence of growth for businesses who do that. Our sellers see a 35% lift in orders when they add one additional channel. And when 5 channels are added, we see a lift of up to 255%. So just obvious growth there. And you'll hear today from some of the best partners in the world on how to unlock even more marketplace potential. So Simon just talked great about it. Payoneer team will talk about it too. And then of course, Amazon here at the end. And of course, throughout all of that, some of the biggest complexities come around shipping, right? And shipping cross-border. So regardless of where you're selling it. Customers love predictability when it comes to e-commerce, but selling internationally includes a lot of inherent unpredictability. So this lack of predictability can be one of the deterrents stopping usually smaller businesses from taking that leap into global fulfillment. So despite those complications, you can use some of these proven best practices to smooth your business entry into the global market. So that's what I like to zoom in here is talking about some tips on how to reduce the unpredictability, how to mitigate risks, and share some strategies on how to deliver, pun intended, an exceptional customer experience globally. So that first thing is on localizing your brand. So I didn't mention it, but the prerequisite here is you really should be bullet point 0. Know your data. Where are your customers? When do they drop cart? Who is dropping off more? The more you know about your data, the more action you can take off of it. I think that's pretty obvious. But in terms of like 33% of global consumers are likely to abandon your cart or their cart if pricing is not in the local currency. So that's a quick fix and a quick tip there. But in terms of actionable things to do, 1, embrace local selling channels. So if you're analyzing your data, you want to know where your people are shopping. A great way to ensure international success is to take the audiences from the largest local marketplaces. So, the US, Walmart, Amazon in the UK and in Europe. So just knowing those local marketplaces is a great way to tap into local customers. Second thing is to run targeted country-specific marketing campaigns. So different cultures respond differently to ads. So it's no one size fits all. So use your marketing data or your market data to make sure you're customizing your marketing campaigns to the consumers to see the ads that you want, the products they're likely to buy. So it's all about delivering the right message to the right audience. And then lastly, this one's pretty obvious, but note the most popular shopping days. My brain's too shipped. Chinese New Year, single days, those are the most popular ones in China. But in the United States and Canada, it's Cyber Monday and the Monday before Christmas. Those are usually the biggest e-commerce sales days. So align your promotions to be around those high traffic days and use shipping as a way to drive urgency for those customers. And then this one's probably the most exciting topic, but probably also the biggest concern for a lot of businesses is customs, duties, and taxes. So when shipping internationally, this is the most complex issue to navigate. A lot of regulations coming from country to country, a lot of variability there, and a lot of it can vary based on time of year, political climate, even the particular customs officer who's inspecting the parcels. So these taxes, these fees put in place by government officials are country specific, and they vary on the value of goods shipped, whether or not they're insured, and how much you paid at shipping. So how can you streamline this? A couple quick tips, and I'll speed through these. One is ensure your documents are accurate, reduce manual process, automate where you can, use systems like ShipStation to help automate that by generating the stuff automatically. So commercial invoices, file them electronically, etc. Leverage product tariff codes. So a lot of acronyms for this: HS codes, harmonization codes. Ensure your items are coded properly and it quickens their processing through customs. Then this one's kind of a no-brainer, but before you start selling your products in a country, make sure you're allowed to ship them there, right? There are some country restrictions on certain products. So before you invest, do that research so you don't end up wasting resources there. This could be an hour in and of itself, but decide on a DDP versus DAP or DDU approach. So delivery duty paid, which is taxes paid by the seller. You usually charge that online at checkout. Best customer experience you can do. Other options is deliver at place, delivery duty unpaid, that's paid by the customer, and by the delivery, or at delivery collected and paid for by the shipper. Or yeah, collected by the shipper, paid for by the customer. And that's the easiest for the seller, it's not much setup. Then thirdly, I'll briefly speed through this, be transparent about fees, right? Simon touched on that briefly, but free shipping is a great thing to offer. People are enticed by it, not always the best business strategy, but offer options at checkout, right? Nearly half of the 70% of reasons people abandon cart are due to unexpected delivery costs. And that's even exacerbated when it comes to international shipping, where there's more variability in those costs. So offer a couple options. We could recommend one, offer quote free shipping, where that cost is absorbed into the cost of the product, or it makes sense. Offer a simple flat rate shipping option if you have a relatively standard line of products. And then option 3 is allow consumers, your customers, to choose their carrier and choose the rate. So that allows you to set a couple different options, and they can kind of put and pick their own journey, right? So if you give them options, all of a sudden they're willing to pay and willing to wait. And it defers that expectation from being the retailer's responsibility on shipping to the carrier that they chose at checkout on your site. Then lastly, optimizing your shipping workflow. So option 1 is choosing between either your own fulfillment option, so dispatching yourself using a platform like ShipStation or a shipping API to help automate workflows at scale and accelerate your in-house team's shipping. Or if shipping is a headache, you can afford to outsource it, employ a 3PL to manage that logistics part for you, right? What we're seeing today, a bit of a trend, is the hybridization of that approach, taking local delivery in Oz in-house, and then employing 3PLs globally to dispatch in the markets that you're selling, right? The advantage there is that it drastically reduces shipping speeds and per label costs as your product is thousands of kilometers closer to the destination. Second option, compare your rates, use more than one provider. This is something I see today as there's been the recent issue with Post not picking up from e-commerce retailers. You put all your eggs in one basket and that basket breaks, your eggs are going to splatter, right? So have a couple different options in terms of carrier partners, and then use a system to determine when to use which, right? And have a backup and things go awry. Then validate address. That can happen in cart, that can happen through a system. So no one expects the wrong address to be entered in, but mistakes happen. So leveraging a service that validates address helps you make sure you send the right package to the right person every time. Then lastly, tracking. Make sure your customers have real-time tracking and delivery information for their package. with this enabled, right, you can create a really seamless customer experience using ShipStation, other platforms. You can have a branded experience throughout this entire journey for tracking, which means you're never redirecting people to a carrier. They're redirected to your brand, and it keeps that brand or your brand top of mind throughout the entire life cycle of the order. And then pro tip here, just a couple examples of carrier partners that are available through ShipStation, but these are household name brands. Ozpost, they have a really good footprint. They're in the postal union. So find the right carrier that's good for you. Our consumer research shows that 70% of consumers say that a negative delivery experience actually negatively impacts their impression of the retailer rather than the carrier, even if it's the result of the carrier's error. So when selecting carriers, have a couple different options based on location, strength of this carrier, which this is a little list of, so you can meet those kind of expectations for each consumer. So to sum up quickly, 4 key points: localize as much as possible, know your customer data and leverage that to localize. Second thing being understand duties and taxes, pick an approach, DDU versus DDP or DAP, I should say. And then be transparent on shipping fees. That's the #1 way or reason why people drop off of cart, is not knowing and not having the right expectation for what it'll cost to get delivered to them, right? So don't surprise customers with something unexpected. And then optimize workflows. So with shipping automation, you'll not only save time, cost, but also be able to grow your business. So you can leverage platforms like ours to really optimize that process and grow your business both domestically and beyond in every new market that you decide to go into. All right, thank you. Looking forward to seeing the rest of the hosts.
Thanks, David. Bunch of ship. I think that is absolutely fantastic. And I also love the slogan that was printed on the box that we all got delivered. I definitely agree, with those couple of points that you highlighted near the end around the carrier and how it impacts, a retailer and the expectations. I personally, as a consumer, find that a large role, that shipping plays in the all-round customer experience and my perception of a brand after ordering from them is massive. So, those sorts of tips that you highlighted around how to exceed customers' expectations with fulfillment, I'm sure many of the merchants found a benefit today.
Yeah.
So, Dave, from Shorties, we're going to head back to the Vino. I understand that we are going to be enjoying that Marlborough drop that I've been looking forward to. So I'm going to leave it in your capable hands, Dave, to walk us through the wonderful notes that Sav provides us, and tell us about the wonderful Marlborough region that I am very partial to.
Wonderful, thank you. You've all received what we call our wine wheel, and it's really basically you need good eyesight to read this one, but to look at the color and then associate that with the color of your wine. And then there's some flavor profiles there which sort of align to that, the color. So, when we sort of open up the Sauvignon Blanc, you'll see a color there, and then look at it on there, and there'll be some characteristics that you'll see in both the nose and also in the flavor profile. So New Zealand. So pour yourself a glass of the Sauvignon Blanc. I wanted to talk briefly just about, before we jump into Marlborough, just around half bottles. And half bottles, we're starting to see in our e-commerce business are becoming quite, increasing in demand sort of exponentially. And largely due to people doing sort of online tastings and stuff like that. But half bottles are a wonderful way to drink fine wine, and they're a wonderful way to drink really good wine in moderation. So what we've started to see is more wineries are bottling premium wines in the half bottle to give a wider net of consumers an affordable option to drink sort of top end wines. I personally, I love half bottles. I think they're more than a glass, but not quite, too much. So I reckon these are, it's a great way to experiment and taste wines. So Isabel Estate, Marlborough across the ditch. We describe in the Australian wine industry the Sauvignon Blanc as the Savalanche that came over and wiped out our Chardonnay.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah,
to my
yeah.
ears,
So
Dave.
bit of
Really,
history.
coming on top.
We as an industry, we got very complacent about our winemaking with Chardonnay back in the sort of 90s. And we started to use different technologies and ways to really sort of try and cut cost essentially. So rather than putting Chardonnay into, fine oak barrels, we started using big giant oak tea bags and putting them into tanks to give an oak flavor. And that flavor profile was quite sort of harsh. And it's almost, I sometimes describe it as, drinking a mouthful of splinters. It's just not very pleasant. And New Zealand was developing this wonderful grape Sauvignon Blanc, which comes, from the Bordeaux region. It's grown widely. And they just produced this wonderful wine that was fresh and vibrant and just hit the market at the perfect time when Australia was really not looking after, its markets very well. And suffice to say, it's been in growth ever since. So it grows year on year. We're starting to see a bit of plateau now, but the US has started taking a lot of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Marlborough region, north of the South Island, produces 70% of New Zealand's total wine production. And of that, about 80% of the vines planted there are Sauvignon Blanc. Isabel Estate is a small estate in the Marlborough region. It only produces about 30,000 dozen bottles of wine. And it's all estate grown. The history of Isabel was it was founded by the family who founded Cloudy Bay, which obviously is the flagship for the Marlborough region, now owned by LVMH. And the family planted this with a couple of other investors and then lent their expertise into that. And it's remained in sort of small ownership since. The winemaker there, Jeremy Mackenzie, is a very famous New Zealand winemaker. He was head winemaker at Villa Maria, very passionate about natural farming. So you'll not find herbicides, pesticides in any of the vineyards at Isabel, and make all their own composts and, just really look after the plants. Vines are plants and they have feelings, as we say in the wine industry. So you need to look after them, talk to them, make sure they're happy, and give them plenty of drink. So this wine is Sauvignon Blanc's fresh and vibrant. This wine's been in bottle a couple of years, and I put it in deliberately just to demonstrate how fine wine ages. And what you found with this is if you've tasted Sauvignon Blanc recently, a 2021 vintage or 20 vintage, it's a big punch of passion fruit in your face, a little bit of kiwi, little bit of, that sort of gooseberry, clean apple fruit. This is sort of starting to develop a little bit of pear characteristic and sort of nashi pear. And I think it just demonstrates just how the half bottle has accelerated the aging process a little bit, but it also shows how fine white wines can age gracefully and change their flavor profile slightly. So my personal recommendation with this is that it goes really well with the Asian flavors. So a little bit like Riesling does when it ages, but this sort of slightly, 2 or 3 year old Sauvignon Blanc goes beautifully with, like if you've got soy sauce in a dish, or if you got some chili, or, and obviously with seafood. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good example of the region. And I think, one of the cleanest places on earth, one of the most, picturesque wine regions. And lastly, just the Marlborough wine region is now leading the world in working out how to make reduced alcohol wines from the vineyard. So without interfering in the winemaking process where you sort of, you extract alcohol from the finished product. So they're working with their viticulturists to grow lower sugar levels to have less alcohol. So watch this space. They're going to be, leading the world.
Amazing. Thanks, Dave. That's very insightful. And Susan, I noticed that you said that you talk to plants. I talk to my plant all the time. Yeah, never responds, but that's probably because I'm going crazy in lockdown.
It's because it's fake, Josh. That's why.
Yeah, and also because it's fake. Thanks, David. I don't think that it'll have enough sunlight here, but hey, it looks good. Thank you for that one, Dave, and I look forward to the red one coming up next as well. It's one of my favorites personally. Next up, we have Nathan Archie, who is the country manager for Australia and New Zealand at Payoneer. He's passionate about e-commerce and Payoneer's role supporting sellers to grow globally and expand into new markets successfully. Previously, Nathan has worked with major global brands including eBay, Sony Consumer Electronics, Village Roadshow, gotta love their theme parks in Gold Coast, and PepsiCo, and he brings significant insight and experience into retail, e-commerce, and cross-border trade. Nathan holds a Masters of Commerce and serves as a non-executive director for several non-for-profits and acts as a board advisor for several startups. Thanks for coming on board, Nathan. Over to you.
Thanks, Josh. It feels like a master's in e-commerce at this, day and age, but I don't think that exists. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it comes through. Thanks everyone for joining. It's great to have you all here, and I hope you're enjoying some of the wine. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about taking advantage of the global opportunity. You've already heard some wonderful words around the opportunity both in Australia and what's happening. And David also shared some insight into what's going on a global level. And I just want to touch on that a little bit further and just share some of the insights that we're seeing from a Payoneer perspective. And obviously, again, it highlights that acceleration of e-commerce that's been occurring since the pandemic last year. And, expected sales this year is on e-commerce is $5.4 trillion and hitting 6.5 trillion by 2024. It's, quite staggering. And I think we're all aware of it. And also that shift again onto mobile. And one of the interesting things about mobile penetration, mobile sales via e-commerce is it's again increasing quite significantly. And a lot of that's driven by the uptake of mobile phone penetration and smartphone penetration throughout the world. We've seen that especially across APAC and in Southeast Asia quite significantly. And as a result, we're seeing a lot more demand in a lot of those Southeast Asian markets for e-commerce solutions. One of the challenges that had occurred within those regions like Indonesia and Malaysia and so on and so forth was a lot of the demand around cash on delivery. And so now with the increase in the penetration on smartphones in those markets, which is close to sort of that 60 to 70% now, it's meant that payments, which has been the problem, that backbone of that issue around delivery, is really starting to change quite considerably, and the opportunity is opening up quite immensely within those markets. One of the other things that we've sort of noticed is that that the growth within e-commerce is the shifting in terms of consumer behavior, and one of the drivers of that, as is indicated by this slide, is that we're starting to see a large number of baby boomers who have started purchasing online. And that shift that is really, again, one of the catalysts specifically for the growth in e-commerce globally. You can see here what we're sort of seeing is a big increase in terms of the number of baby boomers who are actually purchasing and experiencing that customer journey through e-commerce. With that 69% growth in that demographic alone, it's something that there's a large number of individuals who are now starting to purchase. And they're making up a 25% of the online shopping volume at this moment. And increasingly what we're starting to see is that they're not going back to physical retail. Whilst there is a demand for physical retail, and we see that the importance of physical retail moving forward, e-commerce obviously globally is still very, very much growing. And the percentage of e-commerce as a percentage of total sales will only continue to grow. So one of the things that I think Simon alluded to as well was around, what's happening with consumers and the importance around, delivery. And David also mentioned it around meeting the fulfillment. And one of the reasons behind consumers moving away from online sellers was that there was a lack of delivery, a lack of inventory. So therefore that retailers weren't able to meet the fulfillment in terms of the purchases that were being made. And as a result, they were unhappy customers and therefore were looking for other alternatives for other to buy their goods. So what we're sort of seeing is that decrease in loyalty post-COVID. And these are some of the reasons that we're seeing that. Again, price, there's a price sensitivity we're seeing from consumers. The ease of purchase, again, we talked about the increase of baby boomers online. And again, they're looking for a smooth, easy cart click to purchase. And without that, people are shifting to other alternatives to be able to purchase their the items that they're looking to buy. And customer experience is also really critical. Without a good customer experience, again, the consumer realizes that they're not enjoying that experience with said retailer, so they might look to go somewhere else. One of the other interesting things that we're seeing globally, and one of the trends which is very interesting, is the convergence between content, advertising, and commerce. And what I'm referring to there is specifically around the increase in the use of the likes of TikTok and Instagram and YouTube as content vehicles. And now the crossover between those content vehicles and commerce platforms. So we saw a partnership recently between TikTok and Shopify, and the ability to be able to purchase within TikTok. And that convergence is now what the future of e-commerce is going to be looking like. So the ability to be able to buy directly from the content that people are consuming, and how that all links together through advertising platforms and e-commerce marketplaces and your own commerce platforms yourselves. So something to be really, really mindful of. They're predicting this space will be, the equivalent of $164 billion in the next 2 years. So it's really something worth keeping an eye on and starting to look to tap into at this stage. So why should we be looking to sell globally? So as I indicated before, there's been record growth in e-commerce globally. The top 5 e-commerce markets that we've seen, which is China, the US, the UK, Japan, and Germany, are really, really critical markets. And there's lots of opportunities in terms of e-commerce elsewhere in the world as well. You can see at the bottom in terms of sales growth by region, Latin America is a really, really key opportunity. One of the big marketplaces that exists in Latin America, for example, is Mercado Libre. A lot of people haven't necessarily heard of it, but the amount of volume that they do, which exceeds $20 billion a year in terms of GMV, is quite staggering for that region. We compare that to, say, eBay Australia, which is roughly, $3.5 to $4 billion. $20 billion in South America from one marketplace is quite amazing. And I know Amazon also has a really strong presence with stores in that region as well, in Mexico and Brazil, to name two. And it's definitely an opportunity to look into that region, as, again, it's that adoption of smartphone penetration and internet connectivity that is really driving e-commerce sales in those markets. When you're looking to sell globally, a lot of you are experienced sellers on the international stage, but there are a couple of things to consider around market fit, logistics, and obviously costs. And I'll touch on those again in a little bit more detail. But again, does the product work in the market? How can you test? Is there a way to test and learn that product in said market? Marketplaces are often a good opportunity to be able to test it before you actually double down and invest more heavily in that specific market. How do you get that product there effectively and quite as cheaply as possible? And then there's some other costs that you need to manage. So some of the considerations that we see a lot of mistakes being made around is these sorts of 9 key points. Brand messaging, price consistency across channels is sometimes something that, if you've got different prices across your different channels, the consumer sees that because they are quite savvy and they have the ability to connect to your different channels and identify your different pricing, which has an impact ultimately on conversion. Your duties and tax requirements, which Dave so eloquently spoke about earlier, and making sure that your delivery expectations are met. The localization is really, really key. Again, Dave alluded to that as what his sort of key main point was, localization, but that language element is also really, really crucial. So are you speaking the same language as the consumer? Have you set up, your website in the same language? That's sometimes very, very important. Also the product, does the product speak to the consumer in said market? And how do you make sure that that is the case? Understand the local competition, know what they're doing. And again, minimizing, in terms of a Payoneer perspective, really minimizing the impact of your FX. And when I talk about collection, settlement, and conversion, it's the 3 key parts within FX that need to be thought around. The first being collection. How are you collecting your money, your funds from your consumer? And are you collecting that in the method of payment and the currency that they want to use? So for example, if you're selling to Japan, are you collecting in Japanese yen? Are you using, one of their local cards? It could be a SUI card, for example, where they have the ability to make payments from, it's almost like an Opal card in Australia. You can make payments through those. Are you collecting from that? If it's in China, are you using WeChat? Are you using Alipay to collect funds? From a settlement perspective, are you then settling in the local currency to then minimize conversion costs? So often if you're collecting in Japanese yen and then settling straight back into AUD, you can often be paying, in addition to your acquiring fees, which obviously close to 2%, you'll be paying an additional 3.5% in terms of FX conversion. That's sort of very important. And then the last element of conversion is, once you've settled those funds in the foreign currency, how are you converting them to whatever currency you need? So do you need to convert them to USD, or do you need to convert them back to AUD? And if you need to convert them to USD, you don't want to convert them back to AUD to convert them back to USD. So those sorts of things are really important in terms of reducing your costs. I'm just going to jump through because I'm conscious of time. But the other thing too that's important is around marketplaces. So explore marketplace options as a way to test and learn. And there's lots and lots of marketplaces out there that you could look into to be able to sell onto globally. There's lots of benefits to selling on marketplaces. And some of those are really around traffic, that conversion, the ability to experiment and test and learn, and also brand awareness. So a lot of the time, marketplaces have a higher ability to drive traffic and drive brand awareness for your specific brand. Some of the other marketplaces that are worth considering around the world is there's smaller ones that are localized, that exist all over the world. So have a look at, based on your product, what's suitable for you and your product. And it's definitely worth testing some other ones in certain markets that you may not necessarily have heard of. From a Payoneer perspective, what we do is we help businesses grow globally. We've been around since 2005. We're processing around 60 billion a year in payments. And we typically help businesses convert funds. We work with a number of the leading marketplaces around the world to help them facilitate their payments and help them scale and grow in other markets. And we provide e-commerce businesses with a platform to be able to really become a truly global business. So it's about collecting funds from any source that's required, holding those funds, converting those funds. We're offering working capital and cards. And really, we invest a lot of time and effort in helping businesses scale and grow globally and providing you the solutions to be able to do whatever you need to do to grow globally. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. That was fantastic.
Thanks.
I think a key takeaway for me was definitely around that Latin America piece being a really strong commercial opportunity. We often talk about the cross-border opportunity, that is out there. But I often hear retailers talking around, Europe and UK and NZ, or even the US being a market that they're tapping into. But Latin America was an interesting one, and I think that that stat that you called out for the marketplace that you highlighted, $20 billion a year in GMV, is a pretty significant hunk of change and opportunity for businesses to dive into. Right, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. We've got Oliver Ayres.
Sorry, are we doing wine tasting?
Oh, are we jumping straight into that now?
Yeah.
Look, I'm not going to say no, Josh.
even Dave's jumped on ready to.
Yeah.
I just want a glass of red, sort of that time of the day. Yeah, 4:59, bang on.
Marvelous.
Thank you, guys. Our last wine this afternoon is the Chris Ringling Barossa Shiraz, the CR Shiraz. So Barossa Valley.
Hey, what I've got to do is I've just got to interrupt you while I just do that. Don't you just love that sound?
That's brilliant. It's not like it's replaced the popping of the cork, and definitely. It's the screw top wines have been a revolution for the wine industry, which we could talk for hours about. The Chris Ringling Shiraz, Barossa Valley, about an hour north of Adelaide, world famous for producing Shiraz. Shiraz, often called Syrah in other countries, it's the same stuff. But the Barossa is unique in the style it produces. So it's a very hot climate, the Barossa. So you get lots of sun during the day and quite cool evenings. So the vines can sort of recover at night time. They don't get too stressed. And the fruit grows vigorously. So during vintage, prior to vintage, we tend to thin out the fruit on the vines so that we don't have the vine producing too much. and it allows for more concentrated, higher quality fruit to come off the vines. This particular wine comes from the northwestern region. So up there, the Chris Ringling, who is a very famous Barossa winemaker, has produced, or he produces a wine that I think retails around about 3,000 a bottle. And he's, yeah, and he sold I think he sold a barrel recently in an auction in China for close to $500,000 Australian for a barrel of wine. So quite a lot of money for 220 bottles. The characteristics of Barossa Shiraz are it's big, it's opulent, it's got lots of big black fruits, and black pepper is often a sort of predominant flavor. I think with this one, what you get is you get a bit of warmth on the nose from the alcohol, and you get that wonderful dark fruit coming through. So like a black currant flavor. Barossa Shiraz, its natural match in heaven is a ribeye steak cooked on a barbecue. And if you're not, steak inclined, I tend to sort of recommend, something like char-grilled radicchio or, Mediterranean vegetables char-grilled. But the charring balances beautifully with the flavors of the Shiraz, and the pepperiness especially goes well with red meat. The Barossa is getting warmer as a region, as we get warmer as a planet. And I recently saw a graph where we're picking 7 weeks earlier than we did in the 1940s. So the fruit's ripening 7 weeks earlier than it did in the sort of late 1940s. So it just gives us an indication plants don't lie, and they sort of adapt. And it's quite challenging to grow in that sort of environment. And I think what we'll see is different varieties coming through from development and from hotter parts of the world coming to Australia. But Shiraz does enjoy that hot climate, and we are seeing some great examples. Awesome. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, we've got a few more minutes before the speaks, but some faces on the screen that you guys might not have seen as well as Alana from ChannelAdvisor. Hello, Alana. How's it going?
Hi, everyone.
And Camilla, who is from ShipStation, who's a lovely marketing manager.
Hi, everyone.
Does some amazing job. Alana, I'm sure let us know about your role in ChannelAdvisor. Apologies, I haven't met you before.
Yeah. So I've been at ChannelAdvisor now for over 7 years. So I'm well immersed in all things marketplaces and digital marketing. I'm the manager for account services now. So I look after our account management team, and I'm really driven by ensuring our customers are successful with their marketplace strategy. And generally that means making sure that they're growing their revenue at the lowest operational cost.
Awesome. What's your favorite wine so far?
The red. I'm a big red wine fan, but I also love Prosecco. But I feel like because it's the evening, I think a Prosecco is better at lunch.
Yeah. How much of a faux pas is it to combine the two?
Oh.
Camilla, what's your favorite
once
wine?
You go red, you can't go back. Once you're drinking red wine, it's hard to mix it. You have to just stick to red wine.
Yeah, true.
The same as Alana, exactly the same.
So now we will open up to some questions and answers, and there has already been quite a few questions that has been asked, but the floor is open to ShipStation, ChannelAdvisor and Payoneer for any questions that you have or want to direct to any of the team here. So feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A. Jethro, I know you mentioned something earlier around the Christmas leading. Does anyone from, I know that Nathan had responded to that. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, Nathan? Or?
Oh, no, I more just put it in the chat just to get some everyone's views and perspectives from the audience. I thought it was good to sort of see a little bit of banter going on, which was nice in the chat as well, whilst everyone was having some tasting some of the wines.
Yeah.
I think, I just mentioned that there's some articles going around at the moment that wanting consumers to shop a bit earlier. I don't know if David, you or Simon are seeing anything from your ends specifically, given that you're at the forefront of some of the pain points.
The truth of it is, like, we're seeing peaks from like above what was last year's holiday peak today. It's from a shipping perspective, like volumes are unprecedented. I think the news of Australia Post pausing pickups for parcel post last week is a real testament to that. But the holiday shopping's already started, right? I think everyone's been forced to really think about that at the start of the second lockdown a couple months ago. And so I think a lot of established retailers are already thinking, okay, like what do I need to do, or what did I need to do 2 months ago? So I think that this is going to keep encroaching. 2022 might look a little bit different. We might return to that seasonality, but I think this year it's just going to be a blur between like what started 2 months ago all the way through to probably like December 10th.
Yeah, absolutely. David, whilst you're chatting as well, I know we had a question earlier around the AusPost pausing and what other kind of strategies that merchants and e-commerce sellers can have when a carrier, for example, is overloaded as well. What's your thoughts on that? To put you on the spot.
I think the general advice is have a backup, right? Have more than one solution. I keep harking on Australia Post, but they famously let everyone know that they're having challenges keeping up with demand. So have a backup provider, right? Like have someone who has a completely different network. That's a very obvious solution. Just pivot, right? Have the right solutions, technology in place to pivot and be nimble like that. I think a lot of businesses had to learn that. Our teams had a lot of those conversations over those 3 days. It's like, okay, well, what's an alternate? Who's an alternate I can use? I think that's the key takeaway.
Yeah.
One thing I've just seen in the chat that's just come through from Paul Walton is I was literally driving to AusPost Depot and sorting the parcels myself into stillages in the warehouse to get my orders out. I think that's fantastic. You know, we're talking around putting your customers at the heart. He jumped in and saw a solution and made it work, pivoted.
Paul, I think that is fantastic.
I think it is fantastic, but I think Paul would also prefer his carry
job
without him having to do that.
That's what I was about to say as well. And obviously, you know, Paul, feel free to reach out to us. We can always recommend multi-channels. We're very vendor agnostic. And so, you know, there is plenty of, you know, look at your packs that came out today. Star Trek, which is Australia Post owned, however, was getting next day deliveries sent out the next day. So there is other strategies around that. As an e-commerce you know, merchant seller, you've got to keep your customers at the heart of everything that you do. So that is a key one. I do have a question for Simon here from Nicole, or anyone else, but I'll direct it to Simon. When we talk about e-commerce statistics, i.e. 16% on sales online, is there universal description of what and what isn't included under retail, i.e. services booked online, holiday, etc., and do they count?
Yes, it's an interesting question. You see surveys that cover everything that includes auto and gas and all those sorts of things, depending on which region you look at it. Usually, depending on which, they usually have that breakdown of the methodology behind it. Usually it includes consumer goods that are being purchased. So not things like booking online travel or flights or those sorts of things as well. So usually it's just these consumer packaged goods. I'm sure, Nathan, you had some metrics in your slide as well. I assume that's what you're referring to as well.
Yeah, it is pretty similar. It does depend. So some of the international ones were less, you know, X ticketing, etc. Try to remove those elements because we're, you know, focusing specifically on e-commerce. But yeah, it does depend on. There's lots of stats out there that cover off different elements.
Food's another one that sometimes gets caught up into food online.
Yeah, awesome. And we have a question from Nigel to the panel. Is there any lesser brand benefit and lesser consumer loyalty when selling on price alone in single day click frenzy type campaigns?
Who wants? Anyone want to go first? I'm happy to. Look, I
Over
think
to
that's
you, Nathan.
yeah, I think that's a really great, it's a really good question. You know, I've come from a sort of a retail background as well, and on the supply side, and you know, one of the challenges with discounting is that the consumer gets addicted to it ultimately. You know, at these days, so if you look at fashion retailers, say Myer and David Jones, people get used to buying when items are on sale, and the sale items have a place, you know, in terms of the sales cycle. But once you start, you know, getting addicted to the sales cycle, then it becomes something that you have to keep feeding. Like if you look at eBay, for example, I was at eBay when we launched the campaigns that they started doing, the coupon campaigns, for example, where they do 20% off retailers. And, you know, it started off with one retailer, then two retailers, and they do it sort of once a quarter, and then it became once a month, and then it became even more frequent. And Click Frenzy is a campaign where it's sales. So it makes sense to discount in that campaign, obviously, because that's what's going to get you the cut through and get you the buy or the purchases that you need to make. However, you know, how deep do you want to discount is obviously going to impact your bottom line. And it will get your brand out by participating. Essentially, you're buying, it's an advertising. Like discounting is, to me, it's a form of advertising. It's an acquisition model. You put that dollar to a marketing spend, and you're attributing it to that, and then you are going to have some sort of a loss leader to that, and that becomes your loss leader that's going to drive traffic, and then ultimately drive conversion, and hopefully drive customer lifetime value. But that's really what's going to drive your profitability, is that customer lifetime value. And if you're not able to sustain that customer lifetime value by doing the discounting at the front and retain customers in the long term, then you kind of got to look at it and argue, or is it actually worthwhile doing that discounting at that time? So I think you just got to be clever around what it is that you're discounting, how you're managing it, and then how do you grab the customers afterwards and actually make sure that they become your customers long term. That's kind of the critical piece to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. And I will ask our speakers so both David, Nathan, and Simon, one final question. But before I do, Brendan, I have, so any carriers that we can recommend. I think that there is a multi-strategy carrier approach that we can always look at. Australia Post is receiving, and they're quite public about what the demands that there is on their service. But there are plenty of other carriers that you can reach out to, such as Courier Please, Aramex, FedEx, and even some same-day delivery services that aren't. Sendle is another amazing carrier as well. So there's plenty of other options out there. Luckily, we do have a great network within Australia, so that there's more than one option as well. The final question that I'll ask before I hand over to Bonnie to closing, and if there is any other questions, feel free to email your contact at either ChannelAdvisor, Payoneer, or ShipStation, and we can help get that answered for you as well. But for all a question that was asked at the very beginning of this was, who is your customer, consumer, and or seller? So what is your typical customer, consumer, and or seller? We'll head over to Simon first.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I've got my headset sort of switched off a little bit there. Sorry, the question, you were saying that who is our customer? Can you explain the question a little bit more?
Yeah, so who's your ideal customer? What's your consumer or seller kind of consumer? This is a question that's been asked, but more around what's your customer profile and who are the sellers or who are the customers that they're selling through potentially?
Understand. So for us, for ChannelAdvisor, we work with thousands of brands and retailers all around the world. And the goal is to help them to connect to consumers that are looking for their products. So it could be consumer electronics, it could be apparel, it could be obviously a range of different categories. But for us, it's like where you see complexity, and I think Nathan touched on this, especially when it comes to cross-border trade, there's an enormous amount of opportunity out there. So if you're looking for a way to be able to sell into the US or Europe or Southeast Asia, for example, and you're wanting to know how to do that, ChannelAdvisor can help. We connect into 190 different marketplaces all around the world, all through a single platform to help you be able to do that. But also, if you're in a highly competitive environment, if you're a retailer selling against other competitors selling the same products, ChannelAdvisor platform, for example, on Amazon, tells you, obviously the percentage of buy box, but the things that you can be doing to optimize your listings to get a better understanding of what your competitive landscape looks like, how to reprice, the kind of things you need to focus on for a great customer experience. So if you're selling online and it's a complex, if you have, a large amount of SKUs and you're looking to sell also on multiple channels, either multiple marketplaces or through different digital marketing channels here in Australia, or looking to do cross-border trade, that's our customer. We want to be able to help them to be able to get the most out of that, simplify that that path to market.
So Nathan, over to you.
Look, for us, it's really anyone who's operating internationally and needs to send and receive funds globally. That's where we are our customers. So our customers are the likes of eBay and Airbnb and Lazada and Wish and those sorts of things, but most people on this call aren't that size. But we do help, as I mentioned before, 5 million businesses around the world who are just moving money, essentially. So anyone who's looking to move funds, anyone who needs support from a working capital perspective, especially if you're selling on certain marketplaces globally, and anyone who needs access to cards to utilize those funds internationally as well, then we're happy to help. And again, it's anyone who really needs some support to go globally and needs some advice on anything around payments or understanding markets internationally.
Thanks, Nathan. David.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I'll keep it pretty simple. I mean, if you're a business that's really struggling and going through pain scaling operationally, then we'd love to have a conversation. Wherever you're selling and however you're shipping, what ShipStation mission is to help you be really efficient in that delivery process and the shipping component. So yeah, if it's an integration through to ChannelAdvisor, we're great partners, been great partners for years, and it's a seamless connection, and we can power the shipping component of all the multi-channel footprint that you're on, or if it's helping facilitate payments through Payoneer. With ShipStation, like our very broad partnership approach means that however you decide to do e-commerce, we can help support you by helping make the delivery experience really truly exceptional.
Just quickly on that, I was just going to say, sorry, Bonnie, I think when you look at the market, brands and retailers are looking for ways to add additional channels to it. And the barriers to entry are nowhere near as complicated as they once were. They still require support to be able to do it, but there's services and platforms that enable you to do that have brought those barriers to entry down. So it's worthwhile having a look and having a chat to all of those people on the call and companies to better understand what it takes to get that done.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Simon. And again, I just want to reiterate, as Josh said, if there are any questions today that weren't answered, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the contacts at ChannelAdvisor, ShipStation, and Payoneer, and we'll endeavour to get those answers out to you. But I just want to say a big thank you to our event sponsors. Again, ShipStation, ChannelAdvisor, and Payoneer. Without you, we couldn't have enjoyed the lovely vinos and the goodies that came in the box. A big thank you again to our guest sponsor, our guest speaker, Oliver from Amazon, and of course, Dave from Shorty's Liquor. I now believe that I've got a few more tasting notes up my sleeve that I can whip out rather than doing the typical, earthy undertones and fruity notes whenever I try a red. And finally, our attendees. As was mentioned today, the e-commerce industry over the last month has changed dramatically. You've been super agile, you've pivoted to continue to exceed those customer expectations and do the wonderful things that you do. So a big thank you to us, and we very much look forward to hopefully catching up with you in person over a vino or two in the very near future.
Thanks all.